Let's turn our attention to one of the effects of lockdowns and huge effects on our economy of businesses being shut down, and in particular those 3 million people who've been left without any financial support during the pandemic. Last week we spoke to Andy Burnham and the Mayor of Greater Manchester and the Liverpool Mayor Steve Rotherham about their campaign group Excluded UK, and I'm delighted to say Andy Burnham joins us once again this morning. Good morning to you, Andy.
Good
Good
morning,
morning.
Julia.
Now, you've been campaigning, holding Zoom meetings, trying to get the government to listen about these 3 million people. Obviously, many of them, in your part of the world, who, people who've, gone out on their own, set up their businesses, worked hard, and have found themselves without those loving arms wrapped around them, looking after them during this pandemic. Have you made any progress? Have you got any word yet from the Treasury that the Chancellor's planning to help those people?
Not yet, but we live in hope. Of course, the Chancellor is delivering a spending statement a week tomorrow. So there'll be 3 million people hanging on his every word, Julia. We are building the campaign out. We're hoping to hold an event with Sadiq Khan this week. So Steve and I kind of building the campaign out, Liverpool, Manchester, London, starting to link up the cities. Because what I would say to any politician of any party, please just sit down with these people who are your constituents as well. Just listen to their stories about how hard this year has been. As you said, Julia, they're people who went it alone, took a risk, set up their own business, went freelance. I think it leaves a terrible message hanging over the country at the end of this, if it's basically that you've done all of that and you're completely on your own. I mean, it doesn't help build a pro-business entrepreneurial culture in our country. So there are many reasons here why the government should intervene.
And yet
but I would probably say it's basic humanity, really, that should call on them to act.
Well, indeed, but the Chancellor's argument, I think, whenever he's questioned about this, has been, how do you roll out help to these people over and above, universal credit, and like when you often these people simply don't have accounts that have published that it's so open to fraud, and we've seen huge levels of fraud when it comes to bank loans, grants, people claiming furlough money and the like. How do you do this when you haven't got a set of accounts that have been filed previously or something that you can actually verify to show that these businesses existed before the lockdown?
Well, let me just say that the Chancellor's done some really good things this year with furlough and the self-employment support scheme. So let's give credit where it's due. But I think that sounds like a bit of an excuse to me, because these 3 million people, Julia, are all taxpayers. They're not sort of people who are kind of finding a way around the system. They are taxpayers. Often they may use what's called PAYE, so they're taxed at source, or they pay themselves as directors of very small companies, but they are taxpayers. So what I would say to the government is, you've got a record through HMRC of their past earnings, and that would be the way in which you could help them through a tax rebate paid to them based on what they've earned before and what they were likely to have earned this year. There is a way of doing this, Julia, if the will is there. And I would just say it's got to be there, because from what we heard last week, and we heard the kind of pain in people's voices, the sort of, I don't know, this kind of sense of rejection. They've contributed so much to the country. They're not natural political activists, these people. They're doers. They're not complainers. But basically, they feel quite frozen out and quite sore rightly sore about that. And I would just say to the government, that they really do need help. In the end, jobs, businesses, homes, marriages, lives depend upon this. Some people were saying last week that there are voices that can't be heard because sadly some people have been pushed to the brink and beyond it, unfortunately, this year.
And we do know, again, the cost of this. So let's talk about what happens on December the 2nd then, when you fought valiantly against, we managed to going into tier 3, as did Steve Rotherham in Liverpool as well. A lot of that was about the financial help that wasn't then available, but you've been in support of a full lockdown. You wanted it, like your party leader, Keir Starmer, for it to be sooner than it was. But we are seeing the ongoing costs of this in terms of businesses being lost, jobs being lost, and the pressure on people. Talk yesterday about us not really coming out to anything resembling normal life on December the 3rd, going into the tiers again, possibly a new tier, a tier 4, Scotland style, with massive restrictions. Given that we're told that the restrictions didn't work before lockdown, what's the point of going into more restrictions after lockdown?
Well, this is probably where you and I have some agreement on this. I don't think we agreed about the national circuit break, but I do agree with you that it's too much of an ask to ask people to live under perpetual restrictions. And I'll be honest, my heart sank yesterday when I heard some of what was said at that press briefing. The World Health Organization are really clear about this. They say you cannot ask people to live under, continual restrictions, because it goes back to that excluded issue as well, Julia. I think what's building here, let's be honest about it, we're seeing a mental health crisis developing here alongside a pandemic. And I think the government needs to be very careful about this. The reason I supported a sharper, more decisive circuit break was precisely so that we could get back to a degree of normal life beyond it. And I think this problem we're getting into here is living under this perpetual halfway house sort of style of restrictions that don't really do the job, but don't really allow people to live their lives either. It's not great, I would say. So
well, on this, we're going to end on a note of disagreement. I know I've got to let you go, but there's no such thing as a circuit break, and it wouldn't have worked. But we'll have to agree to differ on that one. Andy Burnham, Mayor of Greater Manchester, keep up the good work on those 3 million excluded from all that financial help. We'll see whether we get any announcement from the Chancellor next Wednesday.